I'd like to call to order, please, the November meeting of the Morrisville Planning and Zoning Board, and ask Arlene to give us an invocation.
Let us pray. Father in heaven, we come before you and we thank you that we have the freedom of assembly in a free country. We want to hold up to you our first responders and ask that you give them care and comfort in carrying out their jobs of protecting us. And we do pray that you'll be with us tonight and give us guidance and wisdom in the issues in front of us. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Harleen. Before we proceed to adopting the agenda, I think, Lee, it is your turn to be the voting member tonight. So, Rob, you will participate but not actually vote. Any changes to the agenda from your side, Courtney?
The only thing that I wanted to discuss is we have the UDO general overview presentation that I was going to provide at your request. Just did not know if you wanted to keep it on this meeting, move it to a different part of the meeting, or table it to the December meeting.
I think it's an important topic, but out of consideration for the great number of people here, why don't we move that to item 7, or move it after the public comment session? Any comments on that? So we'll move your 5C presentation until after the public comment session. With that change, do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Motion is adopted. The agenda is adopted. So move on to item 4, which is approval of 2 sets of minutes, the work session and the October minutes. There was a last-minute change that I made to the last set of minutes, but I think, Marty, you've managed to incorporate that. I appreciate that. That was to just note that both our alternates served as voting members at the last meeting. Any other changes or comments on the minutes? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept the minutes of the September draft work session, not September 21st, 2017.
I second that motion.
So I have a motion to approve the work session minutes. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
That motion is approved. And then we'll need a separate motion for the October minutes.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the minutes as recorded.
A second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
That motion's carried. Thank you. So I'm just looking to see if I see Esther in the audience. Thank you, Esther. This is one of those bittersweet moments. Esther is one of the long-time members of the Planning and Zoning Board and a fantastic citizen of Morrisville. One of the folks who has lived here a long, long time and brings lots of history and lots of anecdotes, and she will be sorely missed on this board. I had the pleasure of serving with her for many years, and occasionally she and I were on different sides of a discussion, but she was always the epitome of politeness. And I do remember she once told me, you just have to vote with your conscience. And those are very simple words, but I've carried them forward, and I really appreciate that. I really appreciate everything you've done for this town. So, Esther, if you would be kind enough to come up to the front, we're going to recognize you formally for your years of service. I should have said, for such a long time service, such a young person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you to the town of Morrisville for having the opportunity to serve. While I do not live in the city limits, I'm extremely concerned because I am just one house away in the ETJ. So whatever you do here does impact me and impacts everyone within the ETJ. So it's been my honor to serve and represent them. Thank you so very much.
Courtney, over to you for 5B.
Okay, actually, I'm going to go ahead and send this over to Ben Howe, our long-range planning manager, since Dylan does work in his division.
All right. Good evening. So we want to take the opportunity to introduce our newest employee, Dylan Bruckhouse. He started with us last week, so he's just finished up his third week of work or so. He comes to us with a master's from Rutgers and an undergrad from LSU, and most recently he was an intern with Walk NYC in New York City. So, we welcome Dylan, where he's getting up to speed very quickly, and has already proven to be a valuable member of our department, and we're sure he'll continue to do so. So,
very good. Do you want to say a few words, Dylan? Put you on the spot.
It's been really a good 3 weeks so far, and I'm looking forward to working with you guys in the future.
Very good. Thank you, Dylan. I'd just like to compliment you on your good choice coming to Morrisville, and you'll be working with a fabulous team, so welcome.
It's quite a change from New Jersey and New York.
Right. So we're going to skip to item 6, and in anticipation of a lot of people wanting to speak tonight, let me just kind of reiterate the rules. This is a continuation of the public, or it will be in a moment, a continuation of the public comment session. And we do ask that if you've already spoken, that unless you have new information tonight, that your talk was recorded in the minutes. We did hear from you last month. So unless you have new information, then please be assured that we did hear you last month. If you have new information and speaking individually, then we try and set a 3-minute time limit. If you're speaking on behalf of a group, we extend that to 6 minutes. Now, Courtney, if you want to give us just the introduction to that, would be great.
Absolutely. Good evening, and thanks again for everybody from coming out to the meeting. Speaking to somebody earlier, and I always said that there's really key points in the process when citizens participate. I find that we have the front end where we have very little participation. Suddenly something really important pops up. We have lots of participation, but I'd like to see all the people here. And I just want to comment that, last month, I've attended a lot of different public meetings, but you were by far the most respectful group that I've ever participated with. So I want to say thank you to that. Often it gets contentious and things get heated, and that was not at all my experience last month. So I just want to thank you to anybody that's in here that was here last time. But what I'm going to do is really provide an update of where we are today, where we're going. We're going to... In that process, there's also going to be the public comment session that will be opened up. And then we're going to talk about kind of the next steps, and then we'll get into really the heart of the discussion with the board up there as well. So again, a quick overview. I'm going to make sure that everybody knows how to participate in the public process, where you can get your information. Attending meetings one way, but there's another way as well. Open the public comment session, or I should say continue the public comment session from last month. There were several questions asked by the board at the last meeting. We have the answers to those questions. There are also some significant revisions that are taking place in the background right now. Going to cover some of those, as well as kind of the origin of those changes and the reasons for those changes. And then we're going to go into some discussion topics, just really based off of some comments made at the board level, comments that we've received through the public input process as well. So first, if you don't know, there is a public comment portal out there. There's two ways to get to this portal. One is if you just type in townofmorrisville.org/transportation plan update, you'll see this little icon where the orange arrow is pointing to on the screen. If you click on that, it brings you to a form that you can fill out. Your section option is on the main page if you're not aware. We take you directly. It's always under the news and announcements. The order can change depending on any news added to it. But there's always a link there that will take you directly to the form, so you don't even have to type in townofmorrisville.org transportation plan update. There's a link there as well. In the public comment portal, it remains open as long as we're having a public comment session in front of this board. It will reopen when it goes into the town council. And at that point, we'll reopen it when they're having their public hearing. So that way your voice can be heard in person or it can be heard through the portal, because I recognize that not everybody's able to attend the meeting. So we're running the two processes concurrently. At this point, as of November the 2nd at 7 a.m. in the morning, we received 261 comments. That's just raw comments coming in. We haven't broken it down by any particular topic. We haven't broken it down if somebody's entered one comment or 100 comments. We haven't broken it down. We take each comment as it is and we're just entering it in, and we're not filtering into the comments either, with the exception if there is inappropriate language. We may put a substitution in there, but as a general rule, what you submit word for word is being put in here. So the next thing to do, Chair, if I can turn it over to the board, I'd like to go ahead and continue the public comment session from last month, so to allow everybody in the room to have an opportunity to speak that would like to do so.
Thank you.
And if you haven't signed up, please do so, so that way we can have an accurate record and spell your name correctly as well for the record.
So last month, I tried vainly to go through the list and ask for number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. It didn't seem to work too well, so I think we'll just do it kind of at random. So if you'd like to speak, would you please line up? And if you would give us your name and affiliation, especially if you're speaking for a group. Please go ahead.
Good evening. If you're with my group, stand up. My name is Ty Elliott, and I live at 1161 Crabtree Crossing. I oppose the Crabtree Crossing extension. I believe the public input process has been materially flawed from the very beginning, because the approved greenway called Crabtree Crossing Extension was not shown to the public in the maps presented in the public input opportunities, the interactive as well as the public open houses. The public was misled into believing that there is no currently approved connection between Town Hall Drive and Crabtree Crossing Parkway. Therefore, any lines drawn on maps were without citizens' knowledge that a greenway connection was already approved for that location. Anyone choosing to draw a road connection in that location should have been informed that to do so would destroy an approved and now currently under construction greenway. This is particularly relevant because Morrisville citizens highly value greenway and parks, bike routes, and pedestrian connections. In Morrisville's 2015 Citizen Plan, 23 respondents asked for improved greenways and bike connections. While many comments asked for NC 54 to be widened, only one comment suggested the proposed CCE roadway connection. Perhaps even that person wouldn't sacrifice an existing greenway had it been properly and accurately disclosed. Withholding from the public the material fact that the CCE is an approved greenway casts a dark cloud on the public input process and signals a potential material process failure. I have brought with me copies of the existing condition maps available to the public, and neither the multimodal facilities map, which shows existing and planned greenways, nor the bicycle and pedestrian maps show CCE as a greenway. I have asked staff several questions in person and in writing, but I have not received responses to many of my questions. Some of these questions are at least 10 days old now, and some questions I have been asking for answers for months, like why CCE, as approved in 2009, isn't accurately reflected in the proposed draft plan. I was instructed to enter my questions into the town's portal, but so far my experience has been that it is functioning more like a black hole and not a method for receiving answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. Which group were you representing? Could I just ask you which group you were representing? Do you have a...
Well...
The red people?
Those
Sure.
that are opposed to Crabtree Crossing extension as a roadway.
Okay, thank you. Please go ahead. Give us your name and address and affiliation if you're with a group.
Good evening. My name is Chris Elliott. I live at 1161 Crabtree Crossing Parkway, and I oppose the Crabtree Crossing extension. So why isn't the Crabtree Crossing extension shown on the existing conditions map in the proposed plan as it was approved in 2009? Instead, it is shown in existing conditions in preparation for a future roadway, complete with a side path, the definition of which is a pedestrian pathway located a safe distance from fast-moving vehicular traffic. Existing conditions are supposed to represent existing conditions, not what someone wants them to be. We cannot erase facts out of convenience or in the pursuit of goals. So why hasn't CCE been accurately reflected in each draft plan so far presented? These seem like unimportant distinctions, side paths instead of greenway, but I believe they are critical since they raise suspicions about the preparer's intent to ignore the 2009 Crabtree Crossing Extension Greenway approval currently in effect. If it had merely been an oversight, I would have expected it to have been corrected once it was called to the attention of staff weeks ago, but as of yet, it has not been corrected. I'd like to know how and under what authority Crabtree Crossing was placed into the Campo 2045 plan, since it is currently not an approved roadway in Morrisville's plan. I understand only approved town roadways can be entered into the regional Campo plan. So how is it that Morrisville has not approved the Crabtree Crossing extension, yet Campo already had in its 2045 draft plan? I checked the Campo 2040 plan approved in 2015, and CCE is not in that plan, so someone placed CCE in the current draft Campo plan in the last 2 years, and I would like to understand those circumstances. Planning Manager Ben Howell stated before this board and the Town Council that the Crabtree Crossing extension was entered into the current draft transportation plan as a result of public requests specifically received during the public open houses. Mayor Stolman has repeatedly asked for the public records supporting Howell's statement, but apparently those records don't exist because the town has failed to provide them. Furthermore, I would like to understand how the Crabtree Crossing extension appeared on 2 maps 18 months ago on February 16, 2016, in a presentation made to this board, well before the public open house process. One slide even promotes leveraging the extension of Town Hall Drive to strategically better serve Park West, an unlikely comment from a resident and sounds like promoting commercial interests over neighborhoods. So in closing, my question is this. If it only takes one person to put a roadway into the plan, why doesn't the request by literally hundreds get it removed? Where is the equity in this process?
Hi, my name is Pamela Wright, and I live at 1012 Kelton Cottage Way, and I am representing the board and the community of Kelton Square Condominium Association, and we are opposed to the Crabtree extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wright.
My name is Tony Owen. I'm here to represent the Board of Directors of Preston Falls Villas, and we oppose the Crabtree Crossing extension. We have a number of our members of the Preston Falls Villas Association here. At this time, I'd like to ask those to stand, please. Thank you.
Mr. Owen, I would point out that you spoke last month as well, I believe.
I'm sorry?
I believe you spoke last month as well.
I did, and I have two different comments.
Thank you.
Thank you. The first is a question, needs a little background. It's really a follow-up to what Chris Elliott was saying. In a statement that was sent to ABC 11, Campo's deputy director was quoted as saying, "The Crabtree Crossing extension was included in our draft 2045 plan for evaluation." At the Campo Executive Board meeting on October 25th, comments were received by both towns of Cary and Morrisville, resulting in the town of Morrisville's request that the project be removed from consideration. We would like to be provided the comments that were made at that meeting by town of Morrisville and a possible town of Cary. We understand that members of Morrisville town staff were present, and we would really like to understand, like to know what was said. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Owen.
The second comment is a little different. In the stated mission of the town of Morrisville Planning Department, you clearly say, our mission is to administer development policies that will enhance the quality of life for residential and corporate citizens. I want to repeat that. Enhance the quality of life for residential and corporate citizens. In a 49-page presentation back in September to the town council work session, your engineering consultants presented this 49-page presentation. It was full of metrics, primarily engineering metrics that described everything from shoulder width to volume capacity ratios, etc. Nowhere in that report did I see a measure of quality of life metric for the residents. Missing was this measure of what these plans would do to our community, to our homes, our dreams, and our valued assets. A good plan would not work to build these assets that make the community great, only to destroy them by connecting dots on a map. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Members of the board, I'm Tom Beebe, 125 Hampton Pines Drive. I'm usually here in front of you in a business capacity. Tonight I'm here as a resident of Preston. I think there's two parts to this puzzle or issue. I have concern, and have expressed them in the past, the connection of Town Hall Drive to any street coming out of the RTP. You've seen data, I think, from engineers in the past that any connection to Town Hall Drive, I forget what it's called, Parkway Expressway, or the road coming out RTP that's going to connect to Town Hall Drive, is a bad idea. I think it's a flawed design. I don't know where that traffic goes. McCrimmon is a mess right now, as everybody knows. And by the time the property that's actually on McCrimmon develops, it's going to be worse. And I'm not sure that there's a real good engineering proposal to correct that problem. And if you bring traffic on a commuter artery out of the park onto Town Hall Drive at that point, it's going to load onto McCrimmon, it's going to go on down and load onto Morrisville Carpenter Road, both of which are a mess. And again, I'm not sure there's a good engineering solution for that, at least at present. That brings me to the matter at hand. I urge you not to compound that problem by taking RTP traffic onto Town Hall Drive and then loading it on Crabtree Crossing. That's, as opposed to residential traffic, that's commuter traffic. And to funnel that onto Crabtree Crossing, again, is a poor plan on multiple levels. One, Crabtree Crossing is a 2-lane road. It's just a residential street. It's not meant to be a commuter artery. It's not designed to handle that much traffic. It cannot be widened. It's got safety issues already at a couple of median spots. And it's already a connection or a cut through between Morrisville Parkway and Cary Parkway, which loads that street with traffic that I'm not sure it was ever designed for. And it's certainly not capable of taking more commuter traffic directly out of the park. It's a normal residential street that already acts to some extent as a cut through. To then add commuter traffic onto that is dangerous. It's not designed for it, and it can't be designed for it because it can't be widened. I live there. I live on Crabtree Crossing. This is personal, as well as I think from a development standpoint that I've been in for years. There's a safety issue here. I understand connectivity, but this is not the time or place to put connection onto Crabtree Crossing. I urge you to not do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reed.
Hi, I'm Karen Heiser. I live at 201 Ridge Creek Drive in Morrisville. I've been a Morrisville resident for almost 20 years. I oppose, as you can tell from my color, the Crabtree Crossing extension. We need to provide commuter connectivity on roads that are designed for commuter traffic, not roads that have dozens of single-family and multifamily dwellings directly fronting them. I did a very quick count on Google Maps tonight. There are approximately 75 such residences on Crabtree Crossing, people, literally hundreds of people who would be directly affected by this. It is really not appropriate to run commuter traffic past people's mailboxes as a permanent solution to traffic congestion and as a solution to not tackling the hard problems like fixing 54. You only have to drive a few miles north. To Keystone Park Drive during morning or evening rush hour to see what the end result will look like. And I feel so sorry for the people that live up there. I try to avoid that in rush hour, not only because it's a pain, but because I feel so bad literally driving a few feet from people's mailboxes and front doorsteps and their children playing. I've lived here for almost 20 years, as I said, and for 20 years I've been hearing about how it's too hard to fix 54 because it's a state road and because of the railroad tracks. And yet I've watched apartment complex after shopping center go up. So the excuses have grown stale, and we really need to address the problems with some better long-range planning that keeps the commuter traffic on the commuter roads and doesn't push it through neighborhoods. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board. It's a privilege to be before you tonight, and I thank you for your service to the town. As you know, I'm Margaret Broadwell. I reside at 109 Stella Court here in Morrisville, have done since 1984. Seen a lot of changes, most of them good, and maybe not all of them good. And I know you will vote your conscience and make your appropriate recommendation to the Town Council on behalf of all of our citizens. The new information I'm bringing you tonight is that my promise to that I mentioned at the last time I was before you, that the petition you received from me at that time would be growing, has indeed done that. So you should have at your desk a copy of the latest and, as far as I know, the final documentation to go before you and then the town council. It now has 42 names on it. A very interested property owners are very concerned about what might happen in the future. And I urge you to make your recommendation to the council to please take the proposed connection on the present map of the transportation plan off so that it's no longer a threat to the communities and the families that live there. As an aside, but just as important, I do personally support not making a thoroughfare through Crabtree Crossing Extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Broadwell.
Hi, my name is Lisa Regal. I live at 104 Gray Bridge Row in Cary, and you did hear from me last time, but I want to kind of build on a couple things. Last time I talked about the importance of an interconnected network of bike pathways and sidewalks and greenways to make a community great, to make it economically viable and a place people want to live in. And I just want to mention a few things. Vision Zero, induced demand, and also that a plan should really reflect what you truly want to do. So what I'm hearing is when I've talked to Campo staff, they say, don't worry, we don't have the money, it's never going to be this thoroughfare. When I talk to Morrisville staff, they say, we're just marking it that way so that we can get right away and whatever, it's not ever going to become that. But I really think if you really intend for this to be the low velocity pathway for people to walk and bike, that you should reflect that in the plan. And that's what it should say. The other reason it's really important to have this slower velocity pathway for people who are on golf carts, who walk, who bike, it's not just for the people immediately adjacent. It's for people that are trying to commute from further distances in an active transportation mode, walking and biking. So that leads me to the other item, which is the Vision Zero. Our state, hopefully you've heard of that expression. It's the state's initiative. It's actually an international program, and our state adopted that Vision Zero. It means eliminating traffic fatalities, and bicyclists and pedestrians are disproportionately represented in our traffic fatalities and crashes. And the best way to fix that is to have good road design with lower speed options. And to me, this is a great opportunity, a great spine kind of parallel to 54 where people can commute via walking and biking. And if you have an ethical duty to have that kind of a transportation network. And then the last one is the induced demand. I really feel you've probably heard that term. When you have a roadway and there's other people traffic, people are going to be migrate to that just as they did when the railroad was under construction. So I just think to show vision and good leadership, I really hope that you will keep it as a greenway. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Daniel Reynolds. I live at 120 Clements Drive. I appreciate the opportunity to come before this august board and comment on the same issue that Margaret Broadwell just commented on, the possibility of connecting Green Drive with Clements Drive. And I would like to state 3 simple reasons for opposing that. First, it's been pointed out that there have already been 261 raw comments on the public comment portal, so I will try to keep these comments from being too raw. The first point that I would like to make is that there is already a cut-through which serves this purpose, and connecting Clements with Green would not serve any better purpose. In fact, it would be not be as good as the cut-through which already exists, which is International to Southport. There's already a light at International and Aviation Parkway, and that serves any need for a cut-through much better than Clements and Green, which would just be redundant. The second comment that I would like to make is that I don't think the road is up to the standard to allow for commuter traffic through that area. I can't imagine I assume there would have to be upgrades made to the road, which would be quite expensive. The road is not even does not even have a white line dividing the two lanes or yellow lines marking the edge of the road. I don't know if it could even possibly be widened to handle that much commuter traffic. And the third point is that, at least on Clements, there are only 12 houses with people living on the road. So it would be a huge increase of traffic on the road. And when you combine that with Green, both of which have a speed limit of 25 miles an hour, I would think that to keep commuters from going above 25 miles an hour would require significant traffic calming measures, which would also be quite expensive. And if the road is put through without the traffic calming measures, then at every meeting you'll have people coming forward to request more traffic calming measures. So eventually it's just not going to be cost effective, especially since you already have a cut through which serves the same purpose, international to Southport. Thank you for allowing me for this time to comment publicly, and also like to express my support for opposing the Crabtree Crossing extension cut through.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
My name is Raymond Reynolds. That was my brother that just came up here. I live at Thank you. I live at 128 Clements Drive, and he said everything I was thinking of saying. So I just want to say we don't need that cut through from Clements to Green. It would just put a lot of traffic where there's a lot of families, and like he said, the roads were not designed to handle that. That was designed for a small residential community and not for commuter traffic. And you've already got international that cuts through to from Aviation Parkway to 54. So it would be redundant. I don't see what anybody would necessarily need that for, but it would cause us a lot more traffic through there in a place that really is not designed for it. So thank you very much. And I'd also like to say I'm against the Crabtree Crossing extension too. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Rich Kyra. I live at 114 Hampton Pines Drive in Morrisville. And I think I'm unique in that I've lived on or close to Crabtree Crossing for 30 years. As a matter of fact, I lived there when it ended at the maintenance facility. There was nothing after that. Over the course of those 30 years, a lot has changed. And I am against the Crabtree Crossing extension for a lot of reasons, but I'll just mention three. First is safety. Right now, without the extension, the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is not adhered to by anybody, anytime. My wife and I have worked diligently to have our wonderful police officers from Morrisville come over and actually have radar guns to test, put in traffic counts, and it's still, every day I walk my dog on that street and the people go a heck of a lot more than 25. So safety is a big issue. If there's an extension, it's only going to get worse. Secondly, impact of home values. If that road becomes I don't want to call it a throughway, the home values are going to be impacted in a very negative way. And thirdly, the ambiance that we all enjoy in living in Prestonwood is going to go away. It's not going to be anything like it is today. And since 1988, I've been a member there, and it's been a place to come home to after going on vacation. You feel like you're coming home to go on vacation. So I strongly am against having this Crabtree Crossing extension become a reality, and I implore the board to follow through and not let it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Good evening. I'm Matt Massey. I'm the general manager at Prestonwood Country Club. So our senior leadership and ownership board strongly opposes this Crabtree Crossing extension for all the reasons. Mr. Kyra talked about, the ambiance and the setting and the feeling that we have at Preston would be greatly diminished, but really the safety, not only the safety of our residents, the men, the women, the children, the safety of the community is what I would fear most, and the employees of our country club. We have to cross Crabtree Crossing a lot to do our business each day. So if it became a lot more commuter traffic and a thoroughfare, I fear for the safety of everybody that's around there, residents and also employees that work at our club. And I hope that this does not get pulled from the plan. And so, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Staub. I live at 132 Factors Walk Lane. I've been a Morrisville resident for 17 years. It is good to see all you NC State fans. I'm here to represent the quiet majority. You guys have a very impressive show of force here, and I would be wearing a red shirt if I lived where you live. There's a whole lot more people in Morrisville. I don't know whether I can support this plan or not. I don't know enough about it. Frankly, I'm ignorant. You guys know a lot more. But I heard an opportunity for a chance of increased connectivity. I drive through this traffic, and if it would improve traffic for the town, I'm interested in studies and more effort so that the town council and the board can make an educated decision about it. I'm in favor of keeping the plan alive so you can learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Evening board, evening neighbors. Mark Santry, 221 Ridge Creek Drive in Morrisville. I'm here representing myself and my wife Rhonda, who's in the audience, and I think the rest of the red shirts in the group. I just wanted to reflect on a point that's been made 2 or 3 times, and that is this issue of quality of life. We built our home in Morrisville in 1991, coming across Cary Parkway from Weatherstone and Cary, but we love the area because it provides a great quality of life, a great place to raise families, to enjoy what our area has to offer, and we know that it's been a great growth community, and with that comes planning and traffic problems. I just wanted to relate our experience recently from the period where we did the grade crossing bridge project and the attempted detour of highway volumes of traffic either down Davis Drive or High House, which was roundly rejected by commuters for obvious reasons. There's 2 great cut-throughs, one being Crabtree Crossing, although it's uncontrolled at Cary Parkway, but a controlled crossing at the end of Raintree, which connects to Preston Grand, which connects to our street, Ridge Creek Drive, which intersects with Crabtree Crossing. Being a recent retiree, I had the liberty to do an unscientific study across 4 occasions during this project, 2 experiences in the morning during drive time, 2 in the evening during drive time, and the volumes ranged in numbers from 440 roughly to 610 cars per hour during the 2 drive time slots in the morning and in the afternoon on Tuesday and Thursday. Unscientific, nonetheless. My wife, who's a CPA, has to depart early in the morning to head up to North Raleigh. I had to back her car into the driveway, into the garage every night, just so she could have a chance of living when she tried to get onto Ridge Creek Drive, because commuters are commuting. They're not respecting neighbors trying to go to work themselves. They just want to get from point A to point B. I envision that all over this proposed plan, and for that reason and those reasons, I oppose it in all certain terms. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jean Trenery, and I live at 229 Ridge Creek Drive, and I oppose this extension. And I guess today I had speaking with some Cary residents, and they said, oh, we're not worried because our board said we'll just make a cul-de-sac where Morrisville meets Cary on Crabtree Crossing. Now, this is speculation, and I don't even know if that's plausible or that was just, pacifying them. But is that possible that they could do that if they could block Crabtree Crossing at that point? So these people felt more secure in this. I just ask you as a board, please, you're supposed to help our value of our home and our quality of life, and I beg you, please think of that, because we've all been happy where we are, and it's nice the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Charles Matthews, 209 Oriana Drive in Morrisville, resident for 8 years. Speaking on behalf of my wife and I, given the current plan for eliminating the turn from Morrisville Carpenter onto 54, we would have to support the extension of Crabtree Crossing. Morrisville Carpenter Road itself has been subject to many bad decisions in the past. Whilst I do not wish to push a bad decision onto another neighbourhood, it is going to have a detrimental effect on the residents, certainly along Morrisville Carpenter. If the junction is closed, if we, in order to get to Park West, we have to go somewhere 3-4 miles out of the way, I would urge you, obviously there are an awful lot of people in Redheath, urge you to work with that community. The Savannah community, the Morrisville Carpenter community tend to have been overlooked in a lot of the discussions that went on with Morrisville Carpenter. I do not wish that on the Crabtree Crossing people. But saying that, you are a board that is supposed to look after the majority of Morrisville and not an obviously well-represented subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matthews.
Hi. My name is Stephanie Reed, and I live in Kitts Creek. And I support the extension, the Crabtree extension, just like what the guy ahead of me was saying. I'm really concerned about that intersection at Town Hall and Morrisville Carpenter. I mean, we need to come up with some alternative if this extension doesn't happen. I'm not a big supporter of the 147 connecting into Town Hall. I feel like they're kind of two separate issues. But I do support the extension. I feel like there's too many barriers with the railroad, these homes and stuff that are right on the side of 54. I don't think expanding 54 is going to solve all our solutions. Wegmans going in close by. I mean, I just think we need a thorough study and think about it before we just remove it, because we don't have we have all this traffic. Where's it supposed to go? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Can you please give your address for the
1672 Legendary.
Hello, I'm Charles Cook. I live at 772 Crabtree Crossing Parkway. I've owned there since 2003 and have watched, obviously, as many others, the changes that have taken place. We started this evening, as I came in, with a very noted, validation of service by a member here. And one of the things that was said was that you learn to vote your conscience. And that was one of the things that obviously was made very clear, that is a very important component of taking on the duty of being on this board. I would like to point out that a lion that goes out and gets its food, killed its prey, has no conscience. It's doing so because it is committed by its history. That's a lion. It eats. I bring that point up to say this. If you make an arbitrary decision and vote your decision without hearing the conscience that we are offering you as a group who is being committed, you're not voting your conscience. You're voting your own decision, which is arbitrary. If you want to make that conscience be appropriate, listen to those who come before you. If you don't want to listen to those who come before you, I invite you to come to Crabtree Crossing Parkway and watch the dogs that is walked by individuals who are there, whose sizes are as varied as almost the size of a deer to the size of those that would fit into a hat. There you will learn the conscience that we are presenting to you. I invite you to come and watch the heron that feeds in the creek that's right beside my house, that I love to go out and watch. Every morning it's there. It yelps. I think it knows me as well as I know it. So it knows I'm not going to do it any harm. So it doesn't fly away when I walk out to watch it. If you put that traffic through there, if you put those commuters through there who doesn't have that love of that area as I do, they will have no conscience. They will not express that conscience by slowing down to less than 25 miles per hour. I would invite you to develop that conscience by coming over and watching mothers at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning walking their children with strollers. That is what we're offering, a conscience. Vote your conscience, but let us be your guide to that conscience which you don't have about Crabtree Crossing Parkway. Do not approve this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cook.
Hi, I was here last time. My name is Alan Knuckles, and I live in Morrisville at 105 Bending Oak Way. I also have another house on Crabtree Crossing Parkway. The reason I come back tonight, and I'll try not to repeat what everybody else has said and everything, but I just want to let you guys know, besides all these people here, which the crowd's a little bit bigger than last night, I'm also the president of the Preston Community Association, and I've literally gotten everywhere I go, at the Brugger's Bagel, what are you doing about being opposed to this? I've literally got hundreds of people. So you see hundreds here tonight, and I don't see half of those people that have come up to me, and I've gotten emails also. So I'm getting, and the PCA board is totally against this. Anything you can do, we're against it. The biggest cause here is the safety of our kids, the safety of the people. If you go over there on a Saturday or Sunday or any time in the evening, there's people walking dogs and pets up and down Crabtree Crossing. It's a wonderful place. And like Matt Massey said, there's golf carts that go across. Everybody's using their golf carts. There's young kids that drive their golf carts, also 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, and it could be dangerous. And you see the maintenance guys going across. So I totally understand where he's coming from. And whether we know it or not, the Prestonwood Country Club is a big part of our community and the people. So I beg of you to be opposed to this.
Thank you, Mr. Knuckles.
Hello, my name is Anneli Leander. Me and my husband live on 1212 Crabtree Crossing Parkway, where we enjoy our life since 3 years. Thank you for listening for all the opinions. We understand that there needs to be a change to 54. It's a disaster for commuting and for people entering the way we who live here. But this solution is really, I don't find another word than incompetent, because taking highway traffic through a residential street is just think of this. I wonder who has the right of way when I back out of my driveway on to the street. Is it the commuters or me? We lived through this positive change that you really did with the overpass, but it was horrible to have all that traffic through our street. Also, Crabtree Crossing is a beloved walkway, beloved bikeway, not only by the residents, but by people living nearby. They actually walk through in a loop. And it's all day long. We have deer passing the streets. So this safety issue is a big thing too. So we really oppose this change, but hope you find a better solution for the narrow 54. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erwin Wins, and I have been living for 18 years on 120 Hampton Pines Drive in Morrisville with my wife, who's here as well. And I was prepared to give a long speech, but it looks like everything that I wanted to say has been said better than I could say it. But I read what I had written down anyhow. And it says, I'm here tonight surrounded by my neighbors. We all wear something red to show that we're here as a group for the same reason. We're all here tonight to protest and oppose the Crabtree Crossing Parkway extension. I think all the reasons why this shouldn't happen have been given here. The only comment I would like to add is this. When I found out about this thing, my first reaction was, that can't be true. And then I tried to find out a little bit what was going on, and I kept asking myself, who's responsible for that? Who came up with this plan? And I thought it was some outside group, but now it looks like this is part of the job of the planning department. So when I looked at some older movies that they had, the one thing that struck me was that all the arguments that were made were just encouraging people to vote for this extension. But there was no representation and nothing said in favor of why this extension should not be happening. So that's my complaint. The other thing is I happen to be an engineer scientist, and I've thought about the situation here, and I believe I can demonstrate that the solution that is proposed is not a solution. It's going to cause more and more problems throughout this whole system. And without having a thorough study to check the traffic patterns and all that, it's ludicrous to even propose this thing. So I think they should first do their homework, and if that doesn't in itself show that this won't work, then I'll agree to it. But in the meantime, I think Urban Planning 101, I think, is, and all these communities are conceived that way, that commuter traffic is supposed to be rounded around the neighborhoods and not right through. And this is what they're proposing here. But for instance, I can envision that from wherever this thing starts and going all the way to the end, there's going to be one bottleneck after bottleneck at each and every intersection. And the traffic that should come around, like on 54, and then turns right into Cary Parkway, that is conceived to be a smooth flow. Now we're going to put this thing at the Parkway, the Crabtree Crossing Parkway, where these people, they try to get out, and I live there, so it's hard. But I take that into consideration because the section of Crabtree Crossing Parkway that we have is made for the residents there. Okay, that's why the speed limit's there, but that's why everything else is there. For this thing to work, in the least, they would have to do all this away, which was quite well explained already. So I predict that if this thing goes through as it is, without major changes to the road, we're going to find ourselves, I find myself being 100 yards away from the intersection to the Crabtree Crossing, there's a stop sign. I will sit there and wait to get out because this road it's about 1.5 miles long between Morrisville Parkway and the Crabtree and the Cary Parkway. It will be bumper to bumper. And they're all waiting to try to get in there, and on the other end, the same thing. And the residents there, well, they can sit in front of their driveway and watch the traffic go by because they cannot get out there to go where they have to go.
Mr. Williams, you've had the 3 minutes.
And for this reason, I propose, which been said, that the quality of life, I think we were...
Could you wrap up your comments for me?
I'm saying, what I said here is just, I believe this is totally unacceptable and unprofessional, this proposal, without doing this study.
Okay.
So I propose that this thing gets put on ice and then have that study done and then come back and then we can discuss it. But in the meantime, I think, based on the fact...
Mr. Williams, you've gone way over your 3 minutes.
Come again?
You've gone way over your 3 minutes.
Well, okay.
All right.
But the last thing that would take about a minute, we were here first, and I'm talking about where I live in the Crabtree Crossing Parkway, and I think we have some vested rights which would be grossly violated if this project were implemented in its present form.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak this evening? So thank you all for your comments. Our job as a board tonight is to listen to those comments and to take them in and to think about the various aspects, and we'll be doing that over the next month or so. Courtney, I think you have a presentation that talks about the schedule going forward and so on.
Yes, Chairman. So quickly want to cover where we have been and where we are going. Just as for all those who have not participated along the way. So the first public comment session occurred in front of this board on the 14th. There was another one on the 22nd, and then again it was continued to this evening on the 12th, and then continued to this evening the 9th. There was a next meeting come up on the 14th, and we wanted to talk about the schedule at this point. And talk about some of the future events down the road as well.
Thank you. So I think the proposal is to take a little bit more time over this plan than had been originally scheduled, to have a little bit of a pause, and so you'll be coming back to us with a draft when? In January or in December?
I'm going to cover some additional things later in the presentation, but there's some fairly substantive items that need to be changed related to comments from this board as well as town council. And I'll go over those. If you'd like me to go over them now, I can go over them now if you so.
I think that would be good.
So there's some changes being made to the September draft, which is the one that's available online. In Chapter 1, the council requested at their work session to have an entire section that truly highlights the accomplishments of the 2009 plan, identify what's been built, what's been funded, or what even's potentially been removed, and provide additional information to that. That's a fairly timely exercise, but we are working on that now. Under Chapter 2 in the existing conditions, reading through all of the comments, and there's a lot of information and questions regarding commuting patterns, which roads are commuting traffic routes, which ones are not, and I think it's important for us to have a better understanding of that. So I've asked the consultant to go back and do some modeling, or delve deeper into the model, I should say, to understand when people are entering Morrisville on Road X, are they driving through Morrisville or are they getting off? So, for example, are they peeling off into their neighborhood, or are they peeling off into a employment center? So trying to get a little more information for that to find out truly whether or not Davis Drive is a commuter road, Town Hall Drive is a commuter road, aviation, so on and so forth. The next under Chapter 3, taking a look at the roadways, So the consultant, one of the premises of the plan was based off the regional model. And so the regional model has these cross matrix sections. When I spoke to several people on the phone and in person, I think people found it difficult to follow. I live on X road, which cross section is my road. So we've asked the consultant to go back and take a look at that matrix and follow the current 2009 plan more closely, breaking it down to major thoroughfares, minor thoroughfares, collector roads, local roads, and break that down further so there's a better understanding, and then having options within, say, the local roads or commuter roads due to a variety of variables that may be out there. We've also talked to the consultant about delving further into intersection and access management improvements. There's just this kind of vague table currently in there. What does it mean? So, for example, you can have a road on there that a signal can improve. You can have one with an existing signal that needs changing to the time of the signal, additional turn lanes. It was not very clear in there, so we needed additional information as to what that meant, and then delving into the action, honing in on those intersections and having very specific conversations once that's in place with this board about do you believe those are the appropriate studies and the appropriate recommendations. The project sheets, the obvious things, they're not in alphabetical order. That makes it hard to follow. And then part of it in there, V over C, that may make sense to some of us, but it doesn't make sense to most of us. So taking that PE jargon and turning it into normal and layman's jargon, our understanding, that's another really big thing, and that's just going to take a fair amount of time to transact that change as well. Moving into Chapter 4, the alternative travel modes. The figure 4.2 at best is difficult to read. You have some alignments on there that shift in different directions. Some of the information on there is not accurate. I personally noticed it. Several citizens noticed it. And so that just has to be revised, and that change needs to be made. In Chapter 5 and the action plan, and this is probably where some of the real meat is really going to happen. All the actions and policy statements, they have to be measurable. And I don't mean quantifiable, but measurable. Did we or did we not accomplish a task? So that when we can go through and do our annual benchmarks and our implementation items, we are clearly stating that we are moving forward with the vision that was in this plan. And that's not in there. They also need to go through and tie back to the guiding statements. So if you go in the very beginning of the document, it talks about these 6 guiding statements. Those guiding statements were built as the foundation as to what a lot of the plans and policies and recommendations are then derived from. But then they're not linking back. So you can't just have what in this appears to be just this random policy statement that's not tying back to one or more of these guiding statements. And then if you look in the action statement, there's near, mid, long term, there's short, there's a couple of different terms. There needs to be consistency in terminology, and they need to be clearly defined. What is near, what is mid, what is long? Means different things to different people if it's not clearly defined. And then each particular action needs to have that as well. So taking a look at those tables, breaking them into categories, you have road improvements, you have non-motorized improvements, breaking them down further, greenway, bicycle, have those broken out, having timelines associated with them, and having them, again, link back to the guiding statements. None of that's currently taking place in Chapter 5, and it needs to take place. So that's a fairly substantial change that we've asked the consultant go back and take a look at. So those are the major revisions to the chapters. Now moving on to the appendices. So the standardized cross sections, they don't have enough for local roads. They didn't classify any of the main street. A lot of our neighborhoods now have on-street parking. That wasn't identified. Those need to be added. We've also asked them to go back. Everything's tied to that cross matrix I mentioned earlier. That was based off the regional model, and we were asking them to go back and make it more similar to the 2009 plan. So that entire section is going to have to be changed based off of that. The project data sheets, how did those cost estimates occur? Honestly, if you're reading it, you're going to wonder where the number came from. There's multiple methods out there. You need to be clear, what are those methods and how did that come about? I found parts of it personally difficult to read. Several of you pointed out that same thing. So we need to go through and start taking a look at the readability. And again, it's a lot of PE jargon, I would say, and bringing it down so the average person can understand what's in there. And then the citizen engagement. So it was a good start, but it's not consistent. So some of the public comments are in the table form. Some of the public comments are scanned in. The maps are difficult to read that they've put in there. You know, I'm lucky enough that I know where the roads are. I've been here long enough, but I can't say that the average person can tell what a road is and where it's located simply based off the location within the town and the town boundaries. So that definitely has to be changed as well. And there's a fair amount of information, and this is really getting some questions that council, this board, as well as staff have noticed just from the questions and inquiries I've received from citizens. There's been lots of questions, a little more information about the scenario planning coming from this board. So staff has asked, based off that, you know, the questions that were coming from this board, to prepare an entire appendix summarizing that. There's also going back kind of the beginning of the process. We're taking the greenways out of the Parks and Recreation Plan and putting them in this plan because they are a form of infrastructure here in the town. And so we're taking all the standards that are in multiple plan documents now and moving them into here. So those cross sections are going to be added. And then lastly, as one of the board members politely pointed out, there's an awful lot of acronyms and words in here that are just frankly foreign. So we are going to do our best to put some in there. As well, we have several that we've gone through and just started highlighting in them, and so the consultant's preparing a glossary as well. So those are some fairly significant changes that have occurred through the public input process, through the board input, through the work sessions with council, and then staff has tried hard to identify some common themes and then get those put in here as well so we can get some of the questions answered through the public comment process.
Thank you, Courtney. Good to see a lot of those things. Thank you. I think maybe Ben has some specific answers, or are you going to cover those, Courtney? Some of the requests, specific requests that we've made.
I am going to turn the requests from the board over to the last meeting because that's where it probably gets a little more technical and he'll have a little more information than I do.
Thank you.
So at the last meeting, several board members were asking for a little bit more information and an update on the NC 147 Triangle Parkway Extension project. As a reminder, this is a project that would connect from the existing 147 at NC 540 down to potentially McCrimmon Parkway. It was included in the adopted, as a history, to remind you, it was included in the adopted 2009 Town Transportation Plan, and it is an NCDOT project. It's not a town project. It's currently funded in the adopted State Transportation Improvement Program, which is the NCDOT's 10-year work program, how they fund road projects. It's currently funded for right-of-way acquisition in 2021 and construction beginning in 2023. What's important to note about this is that NCDOT considers it to be a committed project because it has its initial funding for right-of-way in 2021, which means it's within that first 5 years of the 10-year program. And so when DOT says a project's committed, that means they're not going to run it back through reprioritization. So unless the project cost greatly changes during project development, that project's going to get built more than likely on the schedule in the STIP. If the first funding for it wasn't until after that first 5 year period, then it would be subject to be reprioritized every 2 years and could fall out of the STIP or even get moved back. So some more history on the Triangle Parkway extension. There was a hotspot study that was conducted in 2013 by Campo that the town and DOT participated in. This study looked at the impacts of several different alignments, including tying the extension directly into Davis Drive. And while it didn't make any recommendations for a preferred alignment, it did recommend some detailed study of the additional alignments. We're tying it in. It did say the tying it into Davis Drive may have some more positive impacts for traffic movements, but it has other negative impacts to RTP, who's the landowner, or whatnot. So it just recommended some more additional detailed study of those alignments.
Is that going forward? I mean, I don't know if we...
So DOT is currently in what we call project development for that project, and so as part of that, they have to determine what level of environmental review really, and so depending on the level of environmental review the project's required to go through, they will most likely have to look at least 2 alternative alignments. The preferred one and then at least one additional one, just so they can say we looked at options and our preferred one is still the best, or oh no, the alternative one is actually better. So that'll be done over the next 2 to 3 years as they work on the project development.
So when you say committed project, then it's committed that they'll extend it. It's not committed where they'll extend it to.
Correct. It's committed as far as the funding is concerned. That funding cannot be removed from the project. And so as long as the project stays within, I think generally it's 5 to 10% of that funding amount, it's going to continue to move forward. What can get it pulled back is if the funding amount is determined to be way less than is needed, or if something with the project changes and it changes the overall scope of the project or what the project really is. An example of that, especially for this project, would be it's currently shown in the STIP as being partially funded by tolls. And so if for some reason they decided not to put any tolls on the road or not to sell toll bonds for the road, that could affect the schedule and could affect whether the road could be built. Or if they determine that the cost of the road is much greater than what's currently in the STIP, that of course will affect it as well.
I'm just wondering how much, is there any chance to affect a change and nudge them in any certain direction by the town lobbying them? I mean, if it was to connect to Davis Drive, that would certainly help potentially Town Hall Drive, as well as if there is ever any connection in the Crabtree Crossing.
Well, and I mean, the town is certainly, we are staying involved as best we can with the being a DOT project. I will say a lot of the road is actually outside of our jurisdiction. We have a very small segment that's inside of our jurisdiction. Half of that is already built by a developer. And so there's while we can continue to nudge and ask, what we're doing a lot and what we do in a lot of these cases is just make sure that the studies are done and that the data is there to back up DOT's ultimate decision. If our board, if the council makes a, distinct policy decision to push one way or another, we certainly forward that on to DOT and make them aware that our board, would want A or B, but in a lot of times like this, it's very hard it can be very hard to push DOT in one direction or another. The best we can do is stay involved and try and minimize as best the impacts as we can on the town.
So in terms of, you said substantially change the project, would not including the Crabtree Crossing extension in the plan in Campo and DOT's mind significantly change the impact of that?
No, DOT isn't. They're not even looking that far down. They're really focused in on the extension itself and its impacts primarily along McCrimmon Parkway at the intersections of Davis and 54. And then, of course, we from the town will continue to be pushing them to find out exactly what the impacts would be on Town Hall Drive and do whatever we can to try and minimize those impacts if the road is in fact going to be built. A couple more notes on the slide. There is some right-of-way out there. RTP has identified potential right-of-way. It's unclear if they have actually reserved it or dedicated it, but they have at least identified it running along the edge of their property in that area. And then we have one development, Shiloh Grove, that's dedicated right-of-way, both for the roadway and for a connection to the roadway. So, and then for neighborhood connections, Town Hall North is already under construction. They've constructed a portion of the road, and then we're continuing to, as the project development continues, we'll continue to push DOT for as much neighborhood connections as we can, especially to those neighborhoods along Church Street that currently don't have any access except out to Church Street. And then there was a question at the last meeting. I think Mr. Taylor, I know you had brought it up. At the last meeting, you used the term scenario planning a good bit. I think after looking at the minutes again, I think you were probably asking a little bit more about the model. So we felt this was a good opportunity to try and give a little bit more explanation of what this regional model is. And so it's called the Triangle Regional Travel Demand Model, and it's a predictive model that's used to forecast peak period and daily trips, and it's updated roughly every 5 years. Now, it's currently going through an update process now, but the biggest problem with this model is that it has to be approved by outside agencies that we don't really have control over. It's approved ultimately by NCDOT, Campo, our regional MPO, and then the Durham Chapel Hill Carborough MPO, because Campo and Durham Chapel Hill Carborough, they do their long range transportation planning as together, and so we actually will ultimately, if you've heard about the 2040 or 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, that covers both MPOs, so it actually covers a huge area, and this model covers a huge area, so it's approved by these parties. As we were starting the work on this draft plan, we were hoping to be able to use the latest model, and we were told that it's not ready yet, and so that's why we use the 2010 model, which is right now is the current version, which is quickly becoming not the current version. And so what we did is we started with the 2010 model, which has 2010 as the base year, meaning all the roads, all the socioeconomic data, the demographic data put in there is from 2010. And so what our consultants did is took that 2010 model, updated it as best they could for at least the Morrisville area to reflect our growth, our new demographics, and as best as possible our newer transportation network. And then they took that and they modeled out to the year 2040, and those are some of the maps you've seen in Chapter 3. Figure 3.1 is the map that shows the current conditions with no improvements gone out to 2040. That's one that has that's the map that you see that has a lot of red on it. And then there's a second map in the plan, I believe it's actually figure 3.3, that's the current conditions and funded or committed road projects modeled out to 2040. A little bit less congestion, a little bit less red on the map, but still some problems out there. And then once as we get further along in this process and the Planning and Zoning Board confirms their preferred road network, and ultimately Town Council confirms the preferred proposed road network, we'll have one additional model run that will ultimately go into the plan. That'll be the 2040 with the existing network, committed network, and then everything that's planned or recommended in the plan to show if we were able to do all this, this is what the roadways would look like. We expect that would have a lot of green and yellow and blues, meaning the roads are not congested, but we won't know that until we run that model. But that'll be run at the very end of the planning process. With that said, we can use this model to run additional scenarios if requested by the Planning and Zoning Board if you feel that you need some additional model runs and data especially for specific roadways or specific areas. I do want to say the model it's a regional model, and we've pared it down as best we could. Our consultants have pared it down as best they could for Morrisville, but it is still a regional model, so it's a very blunt instrument, and it's not very good at picking up very small road connectors and the impacts of those. And so that's where we have talked with the boards in the past about some options to look at some of those connectivity enhancing projects that we keep talking about. Maybe, put in some action steps for some further study of those. So, and moving on to address that, one of the questions I know was that's come up was a model run for the Green Drive and Millicent Road extensions. For those, no, again, because the road extensions are really too small to pop in the model, so that's where we were saying additional study, more of a detailed study, area studies needed. And then the question about was a model run for the proposed Crabtree Crossing Parkway extension. We did have a model run that looked at that. However, it was run with the current conditions, funded road improvements, and then some additional improvements that are planned or recommended. The Airport Boulevard extension, NC54 is 4 lanes, Davis Drive is 6 lanes. That's the model that currently was run. We as staff agree that we probably need to look at maybe another model run. If you take away some of these larger widenings, what does it do? But that is a model run that has been done. But when it was done, the Crabtree Crossing Parkway extension was coded into that model as only a 2-lane, 25-mile-per-hour road, which is why several meetings ago, I think the question had come up about some of the modeled volumes, and I did stand up here and say that they were fairly low, and that's why, is because it was coded as a 2-lane low-speed road, but all these other road improvements were also built into the model. Certainly as you take out some of these other road improvements, those volumes may increase, and that's certainly something we can talk with our consultants about if the board would like to see some additional model runs on that.
I think my comment last month was to have the model that you mentioned here at the end without CCPE in there, right? To show, okay, if we went with what the majority of our comments have been about, right, and the concerns taken into account there, take that out of the model and run that study, compare it, and see, does it truly alleviate problems to have it in the model? And if not, and we're okay with what that model looks like without the extension being there, then we can have that data in front of us as well.
When I will say the model run that was run, it was run with and without just that short extension in there. So the numbers that I'd mentioned, I think it's been a couple of meetings ago now, the relatively low increase, depending on how you look at it, in traffic, we did run it with and without the extension there. I think one of the problems with that model run was that it included some other roadway projects that certainly would pull traffic away from the extension. And the question is, do we want to know what the impacts may be on that extension if some of those road projects are not constructed before the extension? And that's certainly something that we can look into further if the Planning and Zoning Board would like some of that additional information.
So, Mr. Taylor, if I'm hearing you, we will bring back a model run that's mapped, just a map for you to see, that shows 54 4 lanes, Davis Drive, 6 lanes, Airport Boulevard extension, all the funded road improvements, minus Crabtree Crossing Parkway extension. We can bring that back to you.
Good. Thank you, Rob.
All right.
That's the end of your section. Any more comments specifically for Ben? Okay. Thank you.
So now that you have all that additional information, I'm circling back to the tentative schedule. Again, at this point, the board is really controlling the schedule, and what would you like to see moving forward with regards to the process, Chair?
I think we need at our next meeting to kind of take in what we've already learned. You will presumably not have another version of the plan. We'll still be working from the same draft that we had before.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So that'll be a little bit confusing, but I think we'll work with that. I'd like to take the opportunity this evening to see if any board members have any other questions and requests for data that we'd like to see at our next meeting. Rob, I think we took care of the one that you were interested in. Lee.
The only thing I was thinking about and looking at all this, and maybe it's addressed because you were talking about trying to define some of these intersection improvements, like Morrisville Parkway and Davis Drive. There's constantly backups there because cars are wanting to turn right, and there's really, is there a chance to look at an intersection improvement there that would add a right turn lane from Morrisville Parkway onto Davis Drive heading north?
Yes, there is. So that's where we're going to get down to that Chapter 5. Okay. And if that's one you wanted put in there, and then we can talk about prioritization. How do you want it prioritized? And so if you're mentioning, I'm guessing near term, but I'm not going to.
No, I just didn't know. Like you said, you were just going to clarify those improvements. I was just wondering if that's.
Yeah, so we can go a little bit more, and then we can talk about maybe this is one of those ones where you as the chair suggested, take everything, absorb it, go through those list of intersections and say, which ones do you want to be near? Which one do you want to be midterm? You want to be long-term? Really near term is, 15 years or less. Midterm is, the 16 to 24 years, and long-term is 25 years or more. So, think about that. So I think a lot of intersection improvements may very well be in the near term, whereas if some of the connectivity improvements that are in that same general area of the plan may be mid to long-term. So if I can assign you a homework assignment then, is to really go through and take a look to see what term do you want, and then we can go ahead and get that built into the plan.
Thank you. Anything else, Lee? Craig?
All set.
All right. Arlene?
I agree that, I would like to have more updates and details of the new model run and everything so that we can start consolidating things. Yeah.
Same. All right, I think that's probably just the end of that topic on our agenda.
Before we move forward, Chair, right now the public comment session is open, so you do need me to make a decision to continue it or to close it.
I think it would be appropriate to close the public comment session, but the public comment portal will still be open, right?
No, the public comment portal would close at the same time. My recommendation is really when we get the next draft plan to reopen the ability to speak on that. And how you choose to do that's fine. It can be another public comment session plus portal. It can be portal only. It can be a public comment session only. It's up to your discretion of how you would like to do that.
And by closing both of those, that would give you an opportunity to go through and give us a summary of everything that's been input. Is that correct?
Certainly, we can go through and highlight some of the themes that are in there. I think we have a good idea what the themes are probably at this point. Right. But we can go and do those. We can pull those themes, and what we can do is come back next time and talk about those themes as well, if you're prepared to do that.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Anything else on the transportation plan?
If I may, can I summarize to make sure I have everything appropriately captured? We are going to go ahead and run a model with all the improvements in that last bullet point minus Crabtree Crossing Parkway Extension. That's one item. 2, each one of you is going to come back prepared for the next meeting, deciding where you want long-term, short-term, midterm with regards to the intersection improvements. We are going to go through and summarize the key themes and bring back specific discussion topics on those key themes for the next meeting. And then I just need a decision really at the next meeting how you would like to handle public comment moving forward.
So you mean after December?
I'm sorry?
Well, if we close the public comment session today, we're also closing the portal.
That's correct.
So the question is, when would it be reopened?
That is correct.
So when would we have a draft that people could look at?
Based off of the volume of changes that I know that are occurring, based off additional changes that will likely be substantive, I suspect, in the next meeting, it could easily, due to the holidays, be February before we have a draft.
So I hate to see, no opportunity for the public who could well be still thinking about this and still looking at the draft. I hate to see the portal be closed. Is there a way to keep that open?
Absolutely. We can keep the portal open.
I think that would be a good compromise. But I'm open to suggestions from the rest of the board here.
If it stays open, then in our next meeting, do we have to have an actual session versus more of a working session?
No, sir, you do not.
There won't be a public comment session, but we will certainly be talking about things, and the public's always welcome to come and see what we're doing and hear what we're doing.
Okay, and with the public comment, just as a reminder, we gather everything basically at 7 in the morning a week prior to this board meeting is the point where we kind of gather it and we're able to get the agenda published by the next day. So we'll continue to do that until the portal's officially, taken offline.
Very good. So we'll need a motion to then formally close the public comment session.
I move it.
I have a second for that motion.
Second.
Any discussion of the motion?
I guess my question is, so if we close it, I mean, do we need to make any other additional language before we vote?
No, there's no legal requirement for the portal.
Right.
So that's...
So if we close the session, the portal can still stay open. That's all legal and no problem. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All in favour of the motion, say aye. Aye. Motion is carried. Public comment session is finished. Thank you. I'm going to propose that we take a 10-minute break and then we'll get back to the rest of the agenda. So we are going to resume our November meeting.
Oh, that's okay. I mean, you're welcome to stay. We were not kicking you out, I promise.
So we'll continue our November meeting, this time with the microphone on. Thank you all.
Okay, so Unified Development Ordinance. So the chair and I were speaking and, kind of had this aha moment that 2 of the 5 up here were not intimately involved in the entire UDO development process, and thought we'd go ahead and kind of bring you up to speed on that. And just a little bit about what the UDO is, other than an acronym, and really kind of delve into it a little bit more. So I thought I'd just kind of give an overview of the process. So initially back in May of 2011, we had a report produced by Clarion Associates, and it was an assessment of our current code. They really went through, they delved in and found out what was working, what wasn't working, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So that was really the first step. And then in March of 2012, Council provided additional funding to actually take that assessment report and turn it into a document that we can use today. And so really that was started in March of 2012 and then adopted in 2013. Next step was a town-wide rezoning. So we took the entire land use map as we know it today and virtually rezoned most of the town. And that was adopted in June 2014, and both the town-wide rezoning and the UDO became effective on July 4th of 2014. So the assessment report, it really walked away with 5 key themes. The first theme was streamline the development review process. Through the interview process, it was found that we were a little broken, I think would be a nice way of putting it. There was some inconsistency. Some projects could get through in a short period of time. Some projects came through in a really long period of time. And we needed to make sure it was streamlined and clear and everybody was going through the process in a consistent manner. The next was really to create certainty while allowing flexibility. So the code is law, so it's fairly black and white. But there are instances where 1 inch can make the difference to somebody building a house and not building a house. And we literally have instances where 1 inch does make a difference. So we needed to have those flexibilities where if I walk down the road, nobody's going to know that this person has a 19.5, foot setback and the next person has a 20-foot setback. So we needed that flexibility. And then take the land use plan, like I mentioned earlier, and modify all the zoning districts to implement it. So there was continuity between the plan and our zoning districts. Really kind of improved development quality. Examples of that is prior to the UDO, we had 0 tree preservations requirement. We had special enabling legislation, but we had never utilized it. So we needed to go through and take a look at that and just increase the user friendliness. And that came through multiple different ways. Sometimes it read definitely like an attorney had written it. It wasn't very easy to understand. There weren't any graphics included, and it got a little cumbersome. So the other part of that is there were 5 different regulations. So if a person came in to build a building, they had to open the zoning ordinance, the subdivision ordinance, the design and construction ordinance, stormwater ordinance, and the flood damage prevention ordinance. And heaven forbid you designed your entire site and forgot to look at, say, the flood damage prevention ordinance, and you realized your building was 3 feet too low. So now you have to raise your building, which then changes your ADA accessibility. And that was happening, unfortunately. So then, really the next step in that was to create manuals. So we talk about the flexibility. Sometimes, again, 1 degree can make the difference in whether or not a turn radius is going to be approved. So taking some of those very stringent type rules and turning them into manuals. Manuals allows flexibility. Specifically in the engineering world, if they're able to sign and seal this alternate design, that P is held responsible for the design, why not allow them the ability to do that in certain stances, but providing parameters for that flexibility. So I'm not going to go over all these, but there are 11 articles in the code. I included this because you'll be able to see it if you want to go back to it, and so that's why I have it all in there, but I'm definitely not covering it. So basically, Article 1 is the general provisions. What's the purpose? What does it apply to? It references the zoning map. It talks about previous zoning districts and how they apply in the new zoning world. It's just kind of the legal jargon section, if you really want to get down to it. Article 2 is our administration, and every single process has this little step table that goes along with it. And this really identifies who has the right to review plans. There's a section for the Planning and Zoning Board in here. I know the new board members, I sent you links to it. So this is really who has what role and what purpose. Then it goes on further to talk about the different review procedures, their standard procedures, their specific procedures for different types of development applications. And it goes through and talks about when public notices are required, when they aren't required, what kind of public notice is required. All that information is found in this article. Zoning districts. This is a table. I know y'all seen it a fair amount. But this really gets through and says we have base districts, conditional districts, overlay districts, and planned development districts. This is where our overlays are defined as well. And really, it includes some corresponding purpose statements that came directly out of the land use plan. And it has these little helpful images that give you an idea of what a house or a commercial structure could look like on a lot. Use standards. You'll see this attached to a lot of the rezonings. The current plan will go through and highlight the different uses and include as an attachment to the briefing. And this is where, if you want to know if you can build X use, this is where you're going to go. And it's broken into principal, accessory, and temporary uses. Development standards. For the most part, when an entire site plan or construction drawing plan is being developed, this is where all the meat is that really gets down to what you probably see when certain projects come before you. Anything and everything is covered in here, from block length, lot subdivision layout standards, landscaping, fencing, lighting, buffering, building design standards. They're all covered in this section. And also the floodplain management that I mentioned earlier is actually folded into this section as well. We have an entire section on the riparian buffers. A lot of this does refer back to what the state requirements are, but it really establishes when are they required, what you can do in them, the variance procedures associated with it as well. Then stormwater management. This, again, just establishes those regulations for the different type of detention basins that are available, with a lot of references, again, going back to state regs. Article 6 and 7 primarily come out of our engineering department. They're really kind of the enforcement provision arm, but these are just two sections that are in the article. Then we go on to Article 8, that's performance and maintenance. So as a general rule, a project's going to come in, and before we will issue construction plan approval, they have to provide performance guarantees for all public improvements. The purpose of this is really to make sure that if the project folds, that we can finish out a road project in case they've torn a hole in the road, and we can go ahead and call in those bonds and finish it off. Road is built, they now have to do a 1-year guarantee period. So they're basically still held responsible, even though the project's closed out, for 1 year. Once that 1-year guarantee period is over, we release it, and then the town is now responsible for whatever that public improvement is, or NCDOT. But that's the basic process. Nonconformities, it talks about all nonconformities. easy one that people understand are signs, so that's why the images are in here. But it talks about if you have a non-conforming use, sign, structure, lot, what the parameters are for moving forward with that structure are. Another example to give you an idea, on Scoggins, there was that, on Scoggins and Church, if you drove down there recently, there used to be a cinder block structure kind of right on the corner. That's now no longer there. So that was a non-conforming structure. The roof caved in on it. They had 180 days to secure a building permit to replace that same type of flat roof. They did not secure that permit in time, and so the town ordered them to demolish the structure at that point. So that's an example where we're using the non-conforming features to actually go into the enforcement procedures. We do have proactive enforcement in the town. So John Bernard, a codes enforcement officer, drives around town. These are pictures from different sites that he's taken over the years. Somebody can file a complaint as well. But this section really says, what are our parameters for rectifying or fixing that violation that's out there? Last is Article 11, and this is where all the interpretation and definition section is. So, for example, we have a use that comes in, it's not defined. This section will give parameters for the director to go through and figure out where it's best placed and do that versus saying outright you just can't have the use. Pretty much every use has to be allowed unless we explicitly state it's not prohibited. Strictly state it's prohibited, and there's very few uses that really falls into. We have to find an appropriate category for them. So I flew through it. A lot of it was really just to give you the highlights, and then you can use it as a resource as need be. But do you have any questions at all?
I have an enforcement question.
Yeah.
So, are there certain things that the enforcement, officer or the representative from the town goes and looks for specifically as these are the things we want to find proactively versus things that we just kind of let be until someone complains?
If it's a violation, he is obligated to make sure it's cleaned up. And there's another section, so code of ordinances, where you handle nuisance, which some of the pictures were. So junk vehicles, tall grass, noise comes out of there as well. But no, we proactively, but you have to understand sometimes, we have cases that take a year and a half to fix. And we had a case recently that's been going on, I think, since 2011 that just resolved. So it can take a fair amount of time sometimes to get certain enforcement cases corrected. But it does happen, but typically, let's say, for example, I think one of the common ones is people putting like the waving signs along the road, or, they'll stick them in. John will go to the business and say, they're not allowed. Can you please remove them? I'll swing back by this afternoon to make sure they're gone. If they're gone, no harm, no foul. We've all learned, and we move on. If he goes by that afternoon and they're not there, at that point he's now taking a picture of it, and the next day they're sent a violation plus a fine for them. Typically at that point, they are then pulled out. We get this 9 times out of 10, Director Tanner, I had no idea. Nobody told me. I'm just trying to make a buck. So we do get that, and at that point we explain to them that, they were given the courtesy. They were asked to remove, and we work out it from there. Typically, they come in there, pay their fine, and we move on. But no, if there's something specific going on, if we can't see it, that's where it becomes challenging. For us, we have to kind of see out from the road. If we've had instances where somebody thinks some illegal use is going on in a house, illegal from the standpoint of code, not police enforcement illegal, we knock on the door. We can ask permission to go in. What we can see has to be from the sidewalk. If they don't have a sidewalk from reasonably walking through their yard to get there, we can't peek over fences. We can't just kind of go up and try to look between the blinds. So there's pretty strong parameters for what we can and cannot do.
That was a great overview. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to jump ahead to item 9, I think.
So thank you, Chairman Pritchard. We wanted to give you a little bit of an update on where we were with the update of the sign code in that process, which some of you know we started on earlier this year. So this update was really driven by a 2015 U.S. Supreme Court decision. And that decision dealt with First Amendment rights and the content neutrality of signs. And we always knew that First Amendment rights were a big issue with signs, but the Reed case kind of brought it to a new level. So basically, with the Reed decision, essentially, if you have to read the sign to know what the sign is in terms of how we categorize and define signs, then that sign violates Reed. So I think the most common example that people think of is the realtor sign. Almost every code across the country has standards for realtor signs. Well, unless you read the sign, it says house for sale, you don't know to classify it that way. It violates Reed.
I'm trying to understand what you're saying. When you say it violates this decision, so the decision said what? That
the decision basically said that your sign regulations need to be content neutral. So, and I'll go into this.
Signs don't violate this, the fact that we restricted the sign.
How they are regulated, because you're basing it on its message and what it says.
So we can't make a specific rule for a realtor sign because that's a category of content.
Correct. And our code isn't very different than codes all across the country. Cary just updated their sign code. Durham's in the process of updating theirs, and all across the country, communities are updating their sign codes in response to this decision. Because a lot of municipalities, almost all of them, regulated them the same way we did, and I'll go through that a little bit more. But we needed to make sure that our code complies with this new decision. And then we thought, we know we're going to have to do an overhaul, rework some things, wanted to take that opportunity to see if there are other issues that we needed to address out there at the same time. So just to back up a little bit more and talk a little bit about the process, we issued an RFP to hire a consultant to work on this code update for us. That was issued back in March of this year. And we entered into a contract with the law firm of Ansel Glink in June. And the individual working on the update is a former planner, so he brings the planner background as well as the legal expertise. In July, we then held some stakeholder interviews, and we received the consultant's key issue report in October. So we're to the point of the process where we want to provide all of you with kind of an overview of that report, so you have an idea of what to expect when you see the actual draft amendments. And I will say that until we have that draft, there are going to be a lot of details with that that we just don't know yet, but wanted to at least give you an overview of where things are heading. So if there are major issues or concerns, we know of those before we actually start drafting text. Following this meeting, we'll present that key issues report to the town council. The consultant will start drafting text, and then we'll go through the PZB and the town council with the kind of traditional public comment process and public hearing process. But we're expecting the project to be complete by the summer of 2018. So with the stakeholder interviews, we kind of interviewed a group of internal stakeholders, which includes some town council members. A couple of you on this board participated in those, as well as various members of town staff. And then there's what I would call the external stakeholder group, where we were really trying to get the perspective from different industries on how they thought the existing code was working, and if there were any major issues or things that we should keep in mind while we were working on the update. And so you could see a list of many of the groups that were brought in and participated in those interviews. What we found out from those interviews, the first thing was that the existing regulations are actually working pretty okay. I think we expected or suspected that that was the case. This isn't a code that we had ever really received a lot of complaints about. And if it wasn't for the Reed decision, there's a good chance we wouldn't be working on this update. And the stakeholder interviews kind of reinforced that the bulk of the regulations, our main regulations for, let's say, your business signage, the wall sign on the building, the ground sign out in front of a shopping center, those are working relatively well. And we actually received a lot of compliments that a lot of stakeholders felt that our code was a little bit more reasonable than maybe some of our neighbors. Also heard about the need to maintain a balance between business needs and aesthetics. Where we did hear, concerns or suggestions, those really tended to focus on what I will call kind of these smaller temporary signs. So some of the things that came out of those interviews was a recommendation that some maintenance standards might be lacking in the code, and it would be a good thing to incorporate. We got some comments, particularly from some of the business members that we interviewed, that we might want to consider relaxing some of our regulations for signs that you can't see from the public right away. I think that related more to sandwich board signs and things like that. And some emphasis on how important grand openings are for businesses, particularly that first 90 days. So we heard some of those types of comments, and those are things that we'll be keeping in mind as we move forward and work on the update.
So I have a quick question. So going back to that Park West Village sign, these signs that have multiple things on them. I mean, is there some limit, I guess, at all with the town? I mean, like say Bethany Village. That's an example of one that's like bordering on, in my opinion, not looking that good. It's got a lot of tiny little names in there. You really can't read most of them. It's just cluttered, but it doesn't really, I don't think, help people find what's in the store. But like in your first picture in this was like an example of a really egregious sort of version of that. I mean, is there some limit in our code as to how that would work?
Are you talking about how the sign area is kind of divvied up between the tenants?
Right. Like if you go back to the it's page 2. But I mean, like those signs in that picture, in my opinion, are terrible. Whereas, like, for whatever reason, the Park West Village sign looks nice. I don't know if that's because of the quality of materials or because of the sizing. I don't know. It's just always something I notice when I go to some other areas that aren't as regulated, and you have this like hodgepodge of 1,000 signs that none of which really convey much information to the person driving by because they're too small.
Yeah. What we regulate is kind of the number of signs you could have, the square footage of sign you could have, but it's really up to the shopping center owner in this example to decide how to divide up that space. If you want to get into character and quality issues, you can require that the materials of the sign, say the sign base, be compatible with the buildings. Right. You can do that sort of thing. But as far as the area, the sign face, that's really for the owner to determine.
But they can make it a small individual little signs. They get X amount of square feet, and if they want to put 50 things on there, they can under our rules.
You might be able to say, panels, have to be or can't be any greater than X square feet, but you can't do anything that regulates what the message is going to be.
Right. No, I understand. I mean, I'm just like say, if you look at Bethany Village, it looks better than it did. They changed it about a few years ago it's a much better aesthetic sign, but it's got like almost every single thing in there has its name on that sign. And so, just to me, driving by, that doesn't look good for the town. That looks like a place where people are moving here to get away from.
So I guess the question is, can we make a minimum per business that's represented within that larger panel? Or is that still getting too much into the content regulation?
Say that first part again, I missed it.
Can we say there's a minimum, like, for example, Ross and, Bye Bye Baby, they, representing different businesses in a panel, they would have to be a minimum size per business represented so that it could be read by the public as they pass.
You might be able to, and I'll talk to the consultant about it, have a minimum letter height type of requirement.
Well, can you go back to page 2?
Yeah.
On this?
Scroll back.
So how do we keep that? What's the difference between, like, say, Bethany Village and that? How do we not have that? That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Where's the line, and how do we draw that line, or is it possible to draw that line?
Well, I think we should blow
regulations
the
for
horn.
the number that you could put on a property.
We should toot our own horn a little bit here. I mean, we have good sign regulations because the planning department and the planning and zoning board over the years has come up with very good standards. So we wouldn't allow page 2, but what we have allowed is page 5.
Right.
But then I think it's the individual owner of the developer of that subdivision that is obviously going to have a bigger sign for the guy who's paying more money.
Well, of course. I think you even have like, say, Grace Park.
Mm-hmm.
There's another sign. The signs look beautiful, but then they have these individual things with these black stick-on letters. To me, that's incongruous with the rest of the sign and with the rest of the development. But we clearly don't have a regulation that can get that granular, that you don't just have random stick-on letters on a sign that otherwise is this very nice sign. I don't know. I mean, you see
You're trying
what
to
I'm
get
talking
at
about.
quality issues, and we can.
You're right. Is that even possible?
I guess, are we taking readability into consideration on our minimum standards for the sign sizes and things like that? I guess is the real question.
Okay.
And if not, should we and can we?
Okay.
I mean, this is one of those things, like I said, kind of like pornography. You know it when you see it, but is it, how do you, that's not really a definition. I mean, like for a sign, you see a sign that looks bad, but what makes that sign bad? I guess that's kind of what I'm asking.
No. We could look at some of that and talk to the consultant about it in terms of potential design standards, minimum size letters, things like that.
One other question I had was around the temporary signs. So we speak about it, and the language here is grand openings, things like that, but a temporary sign is a temporary sign is a temporary sign. We can't grant access or revoke access to putting up temporary signs based on the reason for the sign by the applicant, essentially, right?
Right. So if we get to this next slide, and this is one of the main things that we wanted to kind of prepare you guys for as to how this new code is going to approach things differently and just look very differently than what you've seen in the past. You could see in the table, and that's just a handful of the signs that are referenced in our code that have content-based regulations in them. The now hiring signs, the credit card signs, the real estate signs, promotional signs. What we're really going to need to do is get away from those sign types. And when this comes back to you, that language that we're all so used to isn't going to be there. So, kind of you're looking at what the consultant calls time, place, and manner regulations. And a yard sign is a yard sign. A swing sign is a swing sign. A sidewalk sign is a sidewalk sign. They're going to be much more broad definitions and sign types than we're used to and have been working with previously.
Location and, I guess, exposure versus content.
Yes.
Right.
And that's going to be a big change. The one area that kind of differs from that a little bit is the political signs. And we're in a little bit of a catch-22 there because there's some state law regulating political signs that likely violates READ. You have to read the political sign to know that it's a political sign. So there's kind of a question of, do you follow the state law or do you follow the new guidance that's been provided in READ? And the consultant is suggesting continue to follow state law, reference in your code that that's what you're doing, because really it is their regulation and it's going to avoid confusion community to community as to what you can and can't do. So that one, we're suggesting just keep with state statute. But all those other sign types, you are going to see go away.
The only way to satisfy both is to essentially loosen your own sign laws to reflect that of the political sign laws, so that everyone can do what people do for political events without much regulation, essentially.
Right.
Look, is there any way? All right, so this is my biggest pet peeve is political signs. Are there regulations with the state that bans them from being placed in medians or in like sight triangles at intersections where you can't see to pull out because there's so many signs? I mean, I think Cary bans signs in the median.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really follow it, but I don't think Morrisville does.
There are sight triangle kind of standards in the code, but in terms of right-of-ways, we actually, probably about a year ago, maybe less, amended our code to match state code, because DOT has its own regulations as to what there are state regulations as to what you can put in DOT right-of-ways, and there was confusion over that and town right-of-ways. And Courtney worked on that update, but we actually just updated our code to make the regulations the same to avoid confusion.
To answer your question, and I was trying to pull up the statute, for the town, we do allow them in the median. For the town, we do allow that. They cannot block sidewalks. They cannot block line of sight. So if you are at an intersection, and unfortunately most of the intersections are state roads where I see it, you can call us and we can take a look at it. Sometimes we just call the candidate and ask them to move it further back because we receive complaints. But there's no quantity limits or anything along those lines.
And then we still have the thing where they have to, if they're in the right-of-way, ask the adjacent landowner, or can they just put it basically in the right-of-way by somebody's house without asking?
They can put it in the right-of-way beside somebody's house without asking. Just keep it in mind if it's town road. So if somebody, let's just say hypothetically, I'm running for office and I want to go to your neighborhood, and all neighborhood streets are, for the most part, town roads. They have to be placed every 500 feet. But in theory, I could put one next to people.
Right, on each corner, and then you have four, yeah.
As well as every single intersection, street intersections, and you get 4 at that point. But they shouldn't be blocking line of sight, things along those lines. So,
I mean, it's always been a problem in Savannah. People put them on both sides. They put them in a little median there that's like some kind of weird no man's land that no one can regulate, but yet we have to keep up. And they damage the irrigation like the last council election. And I pull out. My car's better now, but I had a smaller, short car. I mean, I literally couldn't see until I pulled out into the road. I mean, that's a consistent thing.
well, in that particular instance that you just gave us, it would be in violation of the code if you can't see. And so to give us a call. And like I said, depending on where we are in the process, sometimes we'll ask the applicant to pull it. Sometimes we'll pull it and call them and tell them to have their sign. But in fairness, I think a lot of times after we've asked them 10 times to adhere to the rules, we just let them know we're pulling them and dumping them.
Well, and they have volunteers that maybe don't, I mean, I understand why it happens. I mean,
Well, and I don't think people a lot of times realize that the view from a sedan and the view from
Right.
an SUV are completely different.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So one of the things that I don't know if it was a surprise to all of us, but was a little bit of a surprise to me when we got the consultant's report is that regulations based on use can be seen as violating READ. And so in our code right now, we say if you're in this zoning district, if you're an institutional use, you get this sign. If you're an office use, you get this sign. We can no longer do that. So our consultant has given us 3 options, and this is one of the things that we want to talk to you about tonight. The first is to just regulate by zoning district. And everyone in the same zoning district gets the same allowance regardless of use. The second is to create new sign regulation zones. So picture kind of the zoning map in your head. It would be a map like that, hopefully not nearly as many districts, but you would be creating sign districts. And the last one is to regulate based on property size. We discussed this for a while at the staff level, and our recommendation to you is that we move forward creating these new sign districts. That really kind of, as we talked more and more, kind of rose to the top, at least in our minds, as the best option because it really allows you to regulate based on character. Couple other reasons why we're making that recommendation is if you have, for example, a shopping center that has a lot of retail in the front, some apartments and other uses in the back, it allows you, even though that whole property and development is in the same zoning district, to break that out a little bit, and maybe you're treating parts of it in different ways. You could also take into consideration, commercial corridors, NC 54. That whole stretch is divided between multiple zoning districts. Maybe we want a consistent look along all of it or parts of it. You could start to do that sort of thing. So we really think that is the best way to go. And that is what we're recommending to you. I will tell you that we have some questions at the staff level still about if we do this, how do we go about amending that map? Is it the same essentially as a rezoning? Or can we use, another process that might not be as cumbersome? And we have not gone through the exercise yet because we're just to this point of discussing it with you, of looking at the map. And so I will say that while we think that's the best way, as we start drawing out that map, it might be harder than we think. So our default, if we're running into unforeseen challenges, would be probably to come back to you with the zoning district option. Property size, we all dismissed pretty easily. That one, just for a variety of reasons, we didn't think worked well. But when we're through here, we're going to have kind of a list of questions to kind of run through with you, and that's one that we're going to be wanting some feedback on, and it's going to be really important for the consultant to know before we start drafting. Some of the other recommended changes, the purpose section of the code, that really only gets looked at if there's a legal challenge, but if there is a legal challenge, that section becomes very important very quickly. A lot of court cases have been won or lost on it. And our purpose statements are pretty weak right now. So just strengthening and expanding on those. Illuminated signs. Right now, our regulations restrict electronic signs to gas stations, so we're going to have to deal with that somehow. And I think the sign districts might be able to help us figure out a little bit better where we want electronic signs and where we don't. And then all of the definitions and the terms and the uses, they're all going to need updated because we're going to end up with new sign categories.
So basically then, because of this gas station thing, you could have any random, if you didn't do it right, any random business could have like a changeable moving letter sign anywhere they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
You also can't control what content is lit and what content is not within that district. So if your rule said, well, you can make the price lit, you can't make anything else lit up. Well, they could go in there, now they could say whatever they wanted in that same display, even if they're slandering whoever they want to slander. You wouldn't have control over what it said.
Mm-hmm. So that might be a tricky one, but as we start drafting and really working on the text, it's one that we're going to be keeping in mind at least. Some of the other recommendations that the consultant had, and a lot of this came out of those stakeholder interviews, pole signs, that we prohibit those and require everyone to do ground or monument signs. I just want to point out that while that is the consultant's recommendation, and at the staff level, I think we support that, you could have a non-conforming pole sign. Based on how our regulations are written now, if someone goes to change that sign face, they would need to bring that sign into compliance. So I want everyone to be aware of that as we move forward, unless we wrote the non-conforming section a little differently.
So a historical marker on the top of a pole.
Maybe there's a pole sign over a certain size.
because that's the frustration with Reed versus
Can't
Gilbert.
just say the business pole sign. The other thing is prohibiting all non-governmental signs in the right-of-way. Right now, there's just a few select signs that are allowed in the right-of-way, but really saying that only government signage, government speech signs can be placed in the right-of-way. What that will affect the most is these temporary directional signs to residential developments that are under construction. Requiring removal of signs that are in disrepair and adopting some maintenance standards. Reviewing the height limitations of wall signs. I think that was consistent across the board with staff and some of their stakeholders that doesn't always work well. Probably allow people to go a little bit higher.
Meaning taller letters or higher up on the building?
Higher up on the building. Your offices, we really don't have a regulation, but other buildings is 10 or 15 feet, and that just always doesn't always work with the design. Requiring landscaping around the base of all ground signs. Most people do it naturally, not everyone does, but most do. And then there were some customer experience, customer service kind of recommendations that came across during those stakeholder interviews. Just in terms of the application materials we provide, making things easier to find on the website. So that's something that we're going to be looking at separately at the staff level. And we're also going to need to be updating our fees after we do the update because all of our sign categories are going to change. So that's going to be a necessary exercise as well. So really, once again, we want to get your feedback before we move on drafting the code, and we're going to be meeting with the council, sharing a similar presentation with them, and talking to them and getting their feedback as well. But I kind of broke this up into a few different groups and share however you want to go about it. Obviously, that's fine. But kind of suggesting that, any general comments, questions about kind of the overall approach and change in approach. There may be a discussion about the use options, any concerns about those additional recommendations, and then anything else you might have that you want to discuss.
Okay, start with Eileen.
Well, my thing about the options, the three options you laid out is like, what is simplest? Whatever works the best. I don't have any skin in the game, shall we say, but it's just like, don't complicate it too much. What's going to work best? That would be my idea about it. And I like the additional recommendation.
The definition of best is a little loose, right?
It was simplest, maybe. Best equals simplest, I think. Easiest to implement. Maybe I'll do it that way.
I will say creating the sign districts is probably going to be the most amount of staff work. We think at the end of the day it's the best option.
Yeah. Best equals most effective. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, that seems to be the way to go. I mean, to have different signs in different zones, and your example of going down 54 is a classic. I mean, that's just going to be unmanageable in the long term. So if you can make the sign zone system work, I think that's the way to go.
I guess my concern with the sign zone system is that when someone as an investment has a property and a business on that property, they're zoned for what they built there, right? And that zoning represents the business that they put there. And if their business, then the zoning, the sign district gets changed because of aesthetic reasons, not necessarily conforming to their business needs, that can create some potential angst. So I'm a little sensitive to that, but at the same time, I think the intentions are going to be right, in terms of creating the sign districts to support maybe more so on the business side than on the residents in terms of prohibiting residents. So if you have, like you said on 54, business, residential, and that's all one sign district, it's not going to be a district that pushes residential standards on the businesses. It's going to be one that keeps one sign, policy essentially there for everybody, and it works for the businesses. I mean, that's the way we would lean in that situation, right?
Right.
Okay, so.
And, existing signs, if the rules did change on them, they're going to be grandfathered in and considered non-conforming. Our non-conforming triggers for compliance are basically if you're altering the sign at all, you need to bring it into compliance. So it's grandfathered until they touch it and start to do something with it.
Until it falls apart.
When you say
and you have to get a new one.
So what if you have to paint the sign?
Right.
I mean, because that's going to encourage someone to have a really dilapidated looking sign for as long as possible,
Which would
because they feel they're going to
policy.
lose their.
You're altering the letters. That would definitely be a change. I don't know how we've treated painting in the past.
Like painting the sign. I mean, typically,
It's faded, whatever.
Ordinary maintenance.
Ordinary maintenance can occur.
But if you're getting a brand new sign that looks the same as the old sign because the lights aren't working in it anymore, or whatever the reason, it's dilapidated, and you want to keep it looking fresh for your business, and the business isn't changing, in that case, shouldn't you be able to replace it with the same exact sign you have?
Yeah, and we'll take a look at it closely. Like we had an instance, in the past probably a year with the Hooters sign. So Hooters is going through rebranding and doing their sign. They were changing the O's, what the O's looked like. And it's a non-conforming sign. And so our rules and regulations say you can't change a non-conforming sign. But really in that case, it was a maintenance. It was the framework stayed the same. It was the plexiglass basically that was changing. So we allowed that under maintenance if they provided us documentation that it was cracked. And they replaced the O's, as a result. But that was really maintenance because the acrylic can get very faded over time, with the sun, and it fades. And that's exactly what really had happened, plus some branding changes that they had. So we get that, fairly often. I think to the point, that Mr. Taylor was making, having 54 corridor. What you're getting now is the possibility for somebody who has a house on there to put a really large sign in their front yard. I mean, that's what's going to potentially happen.
You have to accept that that's okay.
But flip side to that, if we don't have the zones, we could end up with everybody along Kit Creek Road having a very large sign in their front yard. So it was, how do you kind of approach that? And then I think it's going to be a matter, we did this with the UDO. This is what we think the district should be, and let's start testing it. So we had some districts that we thought were going to be medium density, but when we started measuring setbacks and lot widths and things like this, we ended up reclassifying them. So I think we'll have a fair amount of that will take place too.
So I guess under that scenario, you're talking about the size of the property. Like, let's say you have an office building on like 10 acres of land, right? I mean, they would need a bigger sign to be seen, but they may not really be able to have a larger sign because it would have to fit other properties that are much smaller because they're in this sign zone, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know, that would be...
But Park West is 100 acres.
Yeah. Right.
And it doesn't prevent you from doing planned developments where a large development can basically create its own district.
Oh, so you still would be able to do that within...
You would still have the ability to do that.
Then that would solve that problem. Or mostly solve that problem.
Craig, any comments on this one?
Yeah, my first of all, Michelle, good. I know you've worked hard on this, and I know you've been in a lot of different jurisdictions, so you don't have the institutional knowledge of the history of Morrisville, but I appreciate everything you brought to it, and I think you've done a good job. I did read the handout you furnished us, and I did do a little research on the case, and as you say already, we've got to do something. We don't have a choice about it. I think the thing that I'm concerned about more than anything else, and I expressed this when we first met, is that who's going to be the sign police? Who's going to, Courtney's on we're going to have a 311 number for Courtney whenever, anytime we see a sign that's not right, and who's going to pay for all that. So that's number one, how you're going to enforce it, and I think that needs to be included. I do agree with you, and I think the law firm that you hired definitely spent a lot of time describing that sign regulation zone, and I did look on on those two towns that they. And it looks like they have a good organization in there. And also, I think that it's important for confusion purposes that we do try to do something similar to what Kerry's done, because going in and out is going to be very frustrating to homeowners. And I think he cited in his write-up that the town of Cary took a similar approach. And so I commend your solution, and I agree with what you said.
Thanks, Greg. What more guidance do you need?
Just if you guys have any other suggestions or concerns, let us know now before we start drafting. Or if something comes to mind too later, feel free to give us a call. Let us know. Or if you just want to have a question you want to talk through, you could reach out to us anytime.
Can you go back to slide 9 just quickly, just
sure.
In case that triggers anything? Very good. So I'm quite serious about the historical marker issue. We need to do something about them. There's one outside town hall that's on a pole.
I'll ask that question because I don't believe we could call it a historical marker anymore, but there has to be a way to be able to accommodate
Because that's a standard design for those things everywhere, right? I mean,
historical sign district.
So it's going to be a problem everywhere.
Right.
I mean,
there'll be we'll make sure we keep that in mind as we're working through this and drafting the text.
That's the absurdity of that ruling, that you're not making any distinction between a historical marker and a huge billboard on a freeway. It's nuts. Anyway, enough of that. So we'll feed any comments that come to mind. Thank you, Michelle.
Can the sign district be the diameter of the pole?
When we were talking about sign districts, I kind of said, okay, just want to verify. My guess is if you have, a school next to a daycare, next to a church in the middle of a residential zone, you could kind of call those out as a separate sign district because we have a group of things that kind of have the same character, but we can't just pick the one school in the middle of the neighborhood. He's like, that's right. So I don't think around that little pole would work.
All right. It's called spot zoning, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to just bring to your attention and to everyone's attention, we live in a time when historical markers in general are a point of contention. So I think to try to regulate historical signs would even be more contentious.
Right.
We might be able to say that they have some sort of government community purpose.
But ours is just factual.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It doesn't.
They're both.
I would argue getting to Ross is factual. It's. I mean, that's a fact. It exists within that shopping center. But that gets to the point of the absurdity of where content can come to, which many of you have pointed out already.
Historical markers are in the right of way and they're on poles.
Yeah.
Correct. So it's two things we'd have to.
And I think I should say that our goal in a lot of this is going to be to try and keep the regulations, at least in most cases, as similar to what they are today as we can, because we're not getting complaints, and we didn't hear a lot of serious complaints during the stakeholder interviews. But that's going to be tricky to do.
Well, I was quite serious. We as a board, over the years, and with the planning staff, took a lot of time to try and craft sign ordinances that were reasonable and, as you very politely put it, not as annoying as some of our neighboring communities. So, anyway.
It was a repeated theme in almost every interview.
Right. Okay.
Means we're doing something right.
Yep. It's good. Thanks, Michelle. B, Courtney.
I think we're having dueling. Oh, there we go. So the next item is the adoption of the schedule for next month. Marty was kind enough to put the schedule together, and it meets all the requirements of the location, which would be in this building the same time, 6:30 and the second Thursday of every month. We've looked, it doesn't conflict with any town holidays, but you can go ahead and take a look at this, and once it's formally adopted, then we will go ahead and put it on the town calendar for next year. And then any changes to the schedule just to adhere to all meeting regulations, it changes locations, posting it, canceling notice, proper notice, etc.
Okay, and at this point I should point out that Rob, you're also a voting member now because Vinny has left, so you can vote on this one. Any objections, comments on our schedule? In that case, I guess we'll entertain a motion to formally adopt that schedule.
I make a motion to adopt the 2018 Planning and Zoning Board meeting schedule as presented.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Schedule's adopted. Thank you.
Okay, and continuing on the theme of planning board power, we need to go ahead and make a recommendation that ultimately the council decides, but y'all have the ability to make a recommendation for the chair as well as the vice chair for the 2018 calendar year. Per the code, which supersedes certain aspects of the general policy that for the boards and committees guidelines, there's no limits for chairs. So even though the policy guidelines say that there are, since the UDO's law, it supersedes the policy. So there are no limits, so you can have unlimited terms for chair and unlimited terms for vice chair. There's no restrictions on that. Marty's going to hand out a ballot for the chair, and you will fill it out as to who you would like to see as chair next year. The ballots are filled out. No alternates can hold the chair or vice chair positions, so it's a limited scope as to who can be chair or vice chair, simply because we don't have an ETJ member at this point.
Something to write with. I think Peter's going to help me out. He was prepared for the moment.
Going to bias your vote. It was my pencil.
It's a good.
Oh yeah, that's a conflict of interest.
Oh, you'll need it for the next one.
We need it for another one.
Yeah.
Marty, if you want to go ahead and pick up their votes. Everybody completed theirs? Okay.
Be the hard part.
I can look at it and hand it to me. There were 4 recommendations for Peter Pritchard and 1 recommendation for Craig Gross. So if you would go ahead and mark that as Peter Pritchard is recommended for chair for 2018. The next one we'll move on to the vice chair. Since Peter has been selected, please do not mark his name on this ballot. He does not have a twin that I know of to fill that role, so...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's disappeared.
And it's unanimous for Craig Gross for vice chair.
Thank you.
Chair.
I prepared an acceptance speech now.
Please.
You're going to have to hold that speech in your pocket until council makes a formal decision. At their December meeting is when I'll be bringing it to you. Unless I can be really fast and get it to them in their November meeting, which most likely won't be the case. But if you want to attend, let me know, and I'll let you know which agenda item.
It's more fun to watch it on TV.
Okay, so we're moving on to the newsletter. And first, I want to thank Marty. She's taken over the role and responsibility of preparing this every single month. I do appreciate the help. So for new development applications, we had Mason Farm Estates. It is located off of Mason Farm Road in the very back of the Providence Place subdivision. It's a single-family detached development, and then a site plan for 2200 Perimeter Park. We did have several administrative approvals. We had modifications to Perimeter 5, 6, and 7. That's the INC headquarters, and another building that's Reliance Learning. I knew I was going to butcher it. That's where those facilities are going to be located. We also had a bulletin drawing for Sullivan Eastern Landscape that was approved, and then Breckenridge. They're doing modifications to their pool facility, and that was approved as well. And then you're going to start seeing these new small cell telecommunication facilities, and they'll be converting light poles into actually small cell towers as well. They are black. They look just like a telephone pole looks. They are come through Duke themselves, but you'll see a unit sitting on top of them. So they basically change out the one existing light pole and replacing it with one that has a tower on top.
Is it taller than these normal?
They're a little bit taller. Interesting, up where I live, they're all over the place. I noticed them, because my eyeball just turns into things those. But my husband, I asked him if he noticed them. He's like, well, I do now because you pointed it out. So I think from that standpoint, they're concealed for the most part. I mean, they're the same color. They're just going to look a little bit different. But the first one is installing. You'll start to see them more and more. It's a much more cost-efficient way to transmit cell signals than the large facilities. And then we're putting more and more demands on the facilities, and so they're able to meet those demands as technology changes.
So who is the carrier, or is it an independent company that then leases?
They can have different carriers on them, actually. Right. I'm not sure who the carrier was for this particular one, but it can be AT&T, it can be Verizon. But they usually hire a contractor to prepare the plans and do the installation, but they're required to use a Duke light pole.
Okay.
Well, it's not really light pole; it's a cell tower / light pole, but they are required to use that.
Do you know if it's multi-carrier?
I don't know, but I can get the answer.
Yeah, just curious. Thank you.
And Courtney, what's going up at 2200 Perimeter Park? The site plan there. What's going on there?
Do you know off the top of your head?
That's a development that was approved, I think, 10 or more years ago. There were originally 2 buildings to be constructed, only the first one went up.
Like business, commercial? Yeah.
Okay, then there were a few, one town council approval, and that was the annexation agreement that we currently have with the city of Durham. We did renew it, and really what the easy way to describe it is when 540 came through, it was easier for the town to service south of 540. So we have the ability to annex up into Durham County. And then part of Charlotte Crossings up there, part of the Key Bridge industrial area kind of comes down south into ours as well. It was just a formal extension to an existing document. Then we also had several proclamations. We had GIS Day that was recognized. The town went in conjunction with the city of Raleigh, kind of as a partnership for their giant GIS Day. And we also proclaimed October as Community Planning Month, which Peter talked about at the last meeting. We've already talked about Dylan joining our team. And then you are also aware, I believe at this point, that we held a transportation plan update on October 17th with town council. So that's a little bit of what's going on in our department this month. And I don't have anything else, so I will move on to the next item on the agenda, which relates to board comments.
Thank you, Courtney. Arlene.
Got nothing.
Great.
How are we on the extraterritorial?
I'm sorry, but the ETJ?
Yes.
What was the first part of your question?
I was just wondering if you've found a suspect yet.
Suspect, victim, I mean, it depends on how you want to look at it. So we sent out one set of postcards to everybody, had zero response. Sent out personalized letters to everybody. I received one call back. So they appreciated the offer, but they're selling their property to HSNC and moving out of Morrisville. We knew a lot of flyers were going in the mail with the election. So we are now going to send yet another one out post-election. And this time we're not going to send it to property owners. We're going to send it to the resident of, since we know renters are in there, and then try to capture any renters that may be in there that haven't responded. So we have, that's kind of step one in the process. Step two is thoroughly read the statute, and it's vague at best. It says that we are required to give names to the county, and if the county doesn't act on those names, we get to act on the names. But then it's quite silent if those names are from the corporate limit or not. Or so I've sent an email to the Adam Lovelady at the School of Government saying, here's our code, here's the statute. Can you tell me what you think this potentially means? You know, my general understanding is if you cannot find anybody to fill the ETJ seat, then you go to the corporate seat, to the corporate limit seat, but I don't know that for a fact, and that's what I'm trying to nail down. I sent him an email several weeks ago. I recognize he's busy. I just sent a follow-up email this week.
Got it.
So we are trying hard. Even reached out to Esther, sent her a list that we were using for the mailing list. I'm like, you know, upon Peter's suggestion, hey, if you happen to see any of these people, see if they're interested in doing that.
Okay, good.
Those are our next two steps, are finalizing the research and then doing our last mailing out to just kind of the resident of.
Good, thank you. One other thing, welcome, Dylan, and I hope you get a chance to speak to you personally. Spent time up there in Rutgers, and they have, believe it or not, we have a TOD in Morrisville. We don't have transit, but we do have a TOD, and I know I've been to several seminars at Rutgers and I know in New Jersey they did a lot with the genesis of TOD, so I commend it to you. And I noticed too that you do have GIS, and hopefully you'll be able to help us out on that as well. I think that's a big plus, that we've been able to portray a lot of our data graphically now, and it means a lot to us, and it's certainly a lot helps for understanding when we can do that. And welcome, and wish you all the best.
Thanks, Craig. Rob, any comments?
Just what Craig said.
Welcome. Well, I'd like to thank the board for recommending me as chairperson, but as always, if there's something that I need to be doing better, always open to suggestions. So thank you for that.
Maybe a little more heavy-handed on the gavel. No.
Yeah.
Our next thing.
Yeah, maybe over the person's head. Yeah.
Starbucks wouldn't be bad.
Pizza, right? Okay.
That's what I was just mumbling over here. I just said coffee. I made it fairly generic.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll zoom right ahead to item 14. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Do I have a second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.